In this video I am going to compare each version of Windows NT from Windows NT 3.1 to Windows 11 Insider Preview. In this video I will not compare any DOS-based Windows versions. I have made a separate video called The History of Microsoft Windows where I compare each version of Windows from Windows 1 to Windows 11 Insider Preview but not NT versions prior to Windows XP. Comparisons after Windows XP will be the same in both videos. Let's compare Windows 3.1 to Windows NT 3.1. On the left we have Windows 3.1 which was released in 1992 and on the right we have Windows NT 3.1 which was released in 1993. Windows 3.1 is just an interface that runs on MS-DOS. Windows NT 3.1 is an operating system that uses the NT kernel. Windows 3.1 was mainly targeted at home users and Windows NT 3.1 was mainly targeted at business users. In Windows NT 3.1 you can have multiple users. In Windows 3.1 you cannot. On Windows NT 3.1 when you log off or when you start up you have to press Ctrl-Alt-Delete before you can log on. There is then a login window with a username and password box and you can select a domain. In Windows 3.1 when you exit Windows it exits to DOS. In Windows NT 3.1 when you shut down it says it is now safe to turn off your computer and then you would press the power button. In Windows 3.1 to shut down you would press the power button after exiting to DOS. In Windows NT 3.1 you can click Restart to restart. In Windows 3.1 you can type Win to get back into Windows. In Windows 3.1 when you press Ctrl-Alt-Delete it brings up a blue screen with white text and you can close an application that is not responding and if you press Ctrl-Alt-Delete again it will restart. In Windows NT 3.1 Ctrl-Alt-Delete brings up the Windows NT security window with some options. You can lock the computer, log off, shut down, change password or open the task list. You can also open the task list by clicking the button in the top left of any window and then clicking Switch to or by pressing Ctrl Escape. You can also open the task list in Windows 3.1. In Windows NT 3.1 you can run a new task from the task list. In Windows 3.1 you cannot. In Windows 3.1 we have MS-DOS prompt and in Windows NT 3.1 we have command prompt. In Windows 3.1 the file system is FAT and in Windows NT 3.1 the file system is NTFS. In Windows NT 3.1 there is a new program folder called Administrative Tools with programs like Disk Administrator, Performance Monitor, and Event Viewer. In Windows NT 3.1 there is also now more items in the control panel. Let's compare Windows NT 3.1 to Windows NT 4.0. On the left we have Windows NT 3.1 which was released in 1993 and on the right we have Windows NT 4.0 which was released in 1996. In Windows NT 3.1 there is a main window called Program Manager. In Windows NT 4.0 there is a desktop with icons and a taskbar with a start button. In Windows NT 3.1 to launch a program you use the Program Manager and they are organized into groups. In Windows NT 4.0 you click Start and then Programs and they are also organized into groups. In Windows NT 3.1 shutdown and log off are under the File menu of Program Manager. In Windows NT 4.0 they are under the Start menu. In Windows NT 4.0 you can shut down from the Login window. In Windows NT 3.1 you cannot. In Windows NT 3.1 Control Panel is under the main group of Program Manager. In Windows NT 4.0 it is under Start and then Settings. In Windows NT 3.1 Run is under the File menu of Program Manager. In Windows NT 4.0 it is on the Start menu and you can also bring up Run by pressing Windows key R which you can't in Windows NT 3.1. In Windows NT 4.0 there is also a Documents menu on the Start menu that shows recent documents. In Windows NT 3.1 the window title is centered. In Windows NT 4.0 it is left aligned. In Windows NT 3.1 at the right of each window there is a Minimize and Maximize button and at the left there is a menu button with one of the options being Close. In Windows NT 4.0 in addition to the Minimize and Maximize buttons there is also a Close button at the right. At the left there is the icon for that program which brings up a menu. This is still true in modern versions of Windows. In Windows NT 3.1 the Minimize and Maximize buttons are down and up arrows. In Windows NT 4.0 the Minimize button is a line and the Maximize button is a square. In Windows NT 3.1 the menu bar is white. In Windows NT 4.0 it is gray. In Windows NT 3.1 when you minimize programs they turn into icons. In Windows NT 4.0 they minimize into buttons on the taskbar. In Windows NT 3.1 when you restore a minimized program there is no longer an icon. In Windows NT 4.0 there is a button for each running program on the taskbar and you can switch between them and the selected one looks different. In Windows NT 4.0 there are also icons on the desktop, but they do not represent running programs, they are instead shortcuts to programs that can be opened. In Windows NT 3.1 to see the date and time you have to open the clock application. In Windows NT 4.0 it says the time at the right of the taskbar, and if you hold the mouse over it, it shows the date. Let's compare the Task Manager. In Windows NT 3.1 it is called Task List, and in Windows NT 4.0 it is called Task Manager. They both show applications. In Windows NT 4.0 it also shows processes and performance graphs. There is also a menu bar at the top. In Windows NT 4.0 when you delete a file it goes to the recycle bin. In Windows NT 3.1 it permanently deletes it. In Windows NT 4.0 you can permanently delete all the files in the recycle bin by emptying the recycle bin. In Windows NT 3.1 when you press Alt-Tab it shows the title and icon for the program it is switching to. In Windows NT 4.0 it shows the icons for all open programs with a box round the one it is switching to, and it shows the title of the program it is switching to. In Windows NT 4.0 Paint has been significantly updated. Let's compare the logos. On the left we have the Windows NT 3.1 logo, and on the right we have the Windows NT 4.0 logo. Let's compare Windows NT 4.0 to Windows 2000. On the left we have Windows NT 4.0 which was released in 1996, and on the right we have Windows 2000 which was released in 2000. In Windows 2000 there is a quick launch at the left of the taskbar next to the Start button. In Windows NT 4.0 there is not. In Windows 2000 you can add folder toolbars to the taskbar. In Windows NT 4.0 you cannot. In Windows 2000 the Programs menu is collapsed to show only commonly used programs, and it expands to show all programs. In Windows NT 4.0 it always shows all programs. In Windows NT 4.0 the title bar of programs is a solid color. In Windows 2000 it has a gradient. In Windows NT 4.0 the shutdown dialog has radio buttons. In Windows 2000 it has a drop-down list. In Windows NT 4.0 when you shut down it says it is now safe to turn off your computer, and then you would press the power button and there is also an option to restart. In Windows 2000 it can turn the computer off by itself as long as you have an ATX power supply. In Windows 2000 the login prompt has the name of the operating system at the top. In Windows NT 4.0 it has the name of the operating system in the background. In Windows 2000 the File Explorer has been updated. In Windows 2000 some of the icons have been updated. In Windows 2000 there is an active desktop. In Windows NT 4.0 there is not. Let's compare the logos. On the left we have the Windows NT 4.0 logo, and on the right we have the Windows 2000 logo. Let's compare Windows 2000 to Windows XP. On the left we have Windows 2000 which was released in 2000, and on the right we have Windows XP which was released in 2001. Let's compare the skin. In Windows 2000 the title bar has a gradient and the X, maximize and minimize buttons are gray. In Windows XP the title bar is blue by default and 3D. The minimize and maximize buttons are blue and the X button is red. In Windows 2000 the taskbar and start button are gray. In Windows XP the taskbar is blue and 3D and the start button is green. Windows XP has what is called the Luna theme. In Windows 2000 you can customize the exact color of the text and background of any part of the user interface. In Windows XP the Luna theme only has 3 predefined color schemes which cannot be further customized. In Windows XP you can also select the Windows Classic theme, which makes it look like Windows 2000, and if you click Advanced you then get the same customization options as in Windows 2000. In Windows 2000 when you move a window around it just moves an outline and the contents only moves when you let go. In Windows XP the window contents moves around in real time. Let's compare the Start menu. In Windows 2000 it has a single column with the name of the operating system at the left. In Windows XP it has 2 columns with the account picture and name at the top and log off and shut down at the bottom. In Windows XP at the top of the left column it has pinned programs, underneath it has recent programs, and at the bottom it has all programs, which brings up the same submenu as programs in Windows 2000. In Windows 2000 there is also a Documents submenu that contains My Documents and Recent Documents. In Windows XP My Documents and Recent Documents are on the Start menu. In Windows 2000 there is a My Computer icon on the desktop. In Windows XP My Computer is on the Start menu. In Windows 2000 Control Panel is in the Settings submenu. In Windows XP Control Panel is on the Start menu. In Windows 2000 Search, Help and Run are at the bottom of the Start menu. In Windows XP they are at the bottom of the right column of the Start menu. In Windows XP you can enable the classic Start menu, which looks like the Windows 2000 Start menu. and it puts same iComputer icon on the desktop. In Windows 2000 the shutdown dialog has a drop-down menu. In Windows XP the shutdown dialog has icons. In Windows 2000 log off is one of the shutdown options. In Windows XP there is a separate log off option on the start menu, and you can also switch user, which you cannot do in Windows 2000. In Windows 2000 the login is in a window and you type the username to log on. In Windows XP the login is full screen and you click the username to log on. In Windows 2000 Control-Alt-Delete brings up Windows Security, which has lock computer, log off, shut down, change password, task manager, and cancel. In Windows XP Control-Alt-Delete opens Task Manager, and Task Manager has a shutdown menu which it does not in Windows 2000. In Windows XP by going to Control Panel then User Accounts, then change the way users log on or off, you can disable the welcome screen. If you disable the welcome screen then the shutdown dialog will have a drop-down menu like in Windows 2000. It will also have the classic log-on prompt like in Windows 2000. Control-Alt-Delete will also bring up Windows Security like in Windows 2000, and Task Manager will not have the shutdown menu. In Windows 2000 Control Panel has a white background and icons, each of which open up a dialog window. In Windows XP Control Panel has a blue background with categories, each of which open up a list of tasks within the same Control Panel window. In Windows XP you can switch to Classic View, which makes Control Panel look like it does in Windows 2000. In Windows 2000 when the taskbar is full it has arrows to switch between multiple taskbars. In Windows XP when the taskbar is full it starts combining multiple instances of the same program. Let's compare the logos. On the left we have the Windows 2000 logo and on the right we have the Windows XP logo. Let's compare Windows XP to Windows Vista. On the left we have Windows XP, which was released in 2001, and on the right we have Windows Vista, which was released in 2006. In Windows XP we have a grassy hill, and in Windows Vista we have some computer-generated lines. Let's compare the skin. In Windows XP the title bar is blue and 3D. In Windows Vista the title bar is shiny and transparent. In Windows XP the X minimize and maximize buttons are square and separate. In Windows Vista the X button is wider and is joined to the maximize and minimize buttons, and they are joined to the top. In Windows Vista the menu bar is 3D. In Windows XP it is not. In Windows XP the taskbar is blue and 3D. In Windows Vista the taskbar is black, 3D and transparent. In Windows XP the Start button is green and has the word Start. In Windows Vista the Start button is the Windows logo inside a circle. Windows XP has what is called the Luna theme, and Windows Vista has what is called the Arrow theme. The Windows XP Luna theme has 3 predefined color schemes. The Windows Vista Arrow theme can be any custom color and you can enable or disable transparency. Windows Vista also has a basic theme which is 3D but not transparent, similar to the Windows XP Luna theme. Windows XP and Vista both also have the Windows Classic theme. In Windows Vista when you hold the mouse over taskbar buttons it gives you a thumbnail of the running program. In Windows XP it does not. In Windows XP the Alt-Tab switcher has an icon for each program. In Windows Vista the Alt-Tab switcher has a thumbnail for each program. In Windows Vista you can also press Windows key tab, which gives you a 3D window fly-through, which you cannot do in Windows XP. Let's compare the Start menu. They both have pinned programs, recent programs and all programs at the left, and places and settings at the right. In Windows XP all programs comes up in a new menu and each subfolder opens up a new menu to the right. In Windows Vista the left column of the Start menu switches to displaying all programs and the folders open up underneath. In Windows XP the right column is light blue, in Windows Vista it is black and transparent. In Windows XP the profile picture is on a blue bar at the top. In Windows Vista the profile picture partially hangs off the top of the Start menu. In Windows XP the items in the right column have icons next to them. In Windows Vista their icon comes up at the top when you hold the mouse over them. In Windows XP there are log off and shutdown buttons at the bottom of the Start menu, each of which brings up a dialog with log off or shutdown options. In Windows Vista there are standby and log buttons at the bottom of the Start menu, and there is an arrow which brings up a menu that contains the rest of the shutdown and log off options. In Windows Vista there is a search bar at the bottom of the Start menu where you can search for programs. In Windows XP you can search for files and it comes up with a yellow dog. In both Windows XP and Vista there is an option to enable the classic Start menu, and it puts a computer icon on the desktop. In Windows Vista there is a sidebar at the right of the desktop which you can add gadgets to. In Windows XP there is not. Let's compare the log-on screen. In Windows XP it has a light blue background with a dark blue bar at the top and bottom. In Windows Vista the background is a green and blue pattern. In Windows XP it has the Windows logo to the left and the users to the right. In Windows Vista it has the Windows logo at the bottom and the users in the middle. In Windows XP it has a power button in the bottom left that says turn off computer next to it, and it brings up the shutdown dialog which has icons. In Windows Vista there is a power button in the bottom right corner which you can click to shut down, and it has an arrow next to it which brings up a menu with shutdown options. In Windows Vista there is an Ease of Access button in the bottom left. In Windows XP there is no Ease of Access button, but you can still bring up the Utility Manager by pressing Windows key plus U. In Windows XP there is an option to disable the welcome screen and use the classic logon prompt instead. In Windows Vista there is not. However, in Windows Vista, by going to Control Panel, then Administrative Tools, then Local Security Policy, then Local Policies, then Security Options, then changing Interactive Logon, do not display last username from disabled to enabled. It is possible to have a username and password box instead of a list of users, but it will still use the full screen logon UI. In Windows XP, when the welcome screen is enabled, pressing Alt F4 on the desktop brings up a shutdown dialog with icons, and when the welcome screen is disabled, pressing Alt F4 on the desktop brings up a shutdown dialog with a drop-down menu. In Windows Vista, pressing Alt F4 on the desktop always brings up a shutdown dialog with a drop-down menu. In Windows XP, when the welcome screen is enabled, Control Alt Delete opens Task Manager, and when the welcome screen is disabled, Control Alt Delete brings up Windows Security Options which are in a window. In Windows Vista, Control Alt Delete always brings up Windows Security Options which are full screen. In Windows XP, lock is only available when the welcome screen is disabled and can only be accessed from the Control-Alt-Delete screen, and switch user is only available when the welcome screen is enabled and can only be accessed from the Start menu. In Windows Vista, lock and switch user are both always available and can both be accessed both from the Control-Alt-Delete screen and from the Start menu. Let's compare the control panel. In Windows XP the background is blue, in Vista the background is white. In XP the bar at the left is blue, in Vista the bar at the left has a blue and green gradient and some lines. In Windows XP, when you click on a category, it then displays the tasks within that category. In Windows Vista the tasks are displayed underneath the category. Both control panels have an option to switch to classic view. In Windows Vista, when you right-click, the desktop properties has been renamed to personalize. In Windows XP the display properties dialog has tabs along the top. In Windows Vista the personalization window has a list of items, some of which switch the personalization window to displaying that when you click them, and some bring up a dialog that looks like that setting in Windows XP but with only one tab. In Windows XP, when changing the background, you have to click on each one to see what it looks like, and then you have to click apply to set it. In Windows Vista you can see what each background looks like without having to click them, and it changes as soon as you click them without having to click apply. In Windows Vista there are some new screensavers such as bubbles. However, some of the old screensavers such as pipes have been removed. Let's compare the File Explorer. In Windows XP it has the title and icon in the title bar. In Windows Vista the title bar is empty even though there is enough space. In Windows XP the menu bar is always there. In Windows Vista the menu bar only comes up when you press Alt. In Windows XP there is an up button. In Windows Vista there is not. In Windows XP the address bar has the file path text. In Windows Vista it has breadcrumbs, and you can click any part of the file path to go to that location and click the arrow to bring up a list of folders in that location. In Windows Vista the arrow from the title bar extends down into the address bar. In Windows XP there is a task pane at the left which can be switched to displaying folders or search. In Windows Vista it displays folders at the left, details at the bottom, and there is a search box in the top right. In Windows XP the folder view can be thumbnails, titles, icons, list or details. In Windows Vista it can be titles, details, list or any size of icons. In Windows Vista the drives have a bar underneath to show how full they are. In Windows XP they do not. In Windows Vista My Documents, My Pictures, My Music and My Computer have been renamed to Documents, Pictures, Music and Computer. In Windows Vista there are some new games such as Ink Ball and Purple Place. Some of the existing games such as Minesweeper and Solitaire have also been updated. Let's compare the logos. On the left we have the Windows XP logo, and on the right we have the Windows Vista logo. Let's compare Windows Vista to Windows 7. On the left we have Windows Vista, which was released in 2006, and on the right we have Windows 7, which was released in 2009. In Windows Vista we have some computer-generated lines, and in Windows 7 we have the Windows logo on a blue leafy background. Let's compare the taskbar. In Windows 7 the taskbar is thicker than it is in Windows Vista. In Windows Vista the taskbar is 3D, in Windows 7 it is not. In Windows Vista it shows a separate taskbar button for each instance of each running program, and they have labels. When you put the mouse over them it shows a thumbnail, but the thumbnail goes away as soon as you take the mouse off that taskbar button. In Windows 7 the taskbar buttons just have icons with no text, and it combines multiple instances of the same program, and when you put the mouse over the taskbar buttons it comes up with a thumbnail for each instance of that program with the labels above. You can then click the thumbnail to switch to that instance, or hold the mouse over the thumbnail to show just that application, and it shows a glassy outline for all the other applications. In Windows 7 you can move the taskbar buttons around. In Windows Vista you cannot. In Windows Vista there is a quick launch at the left of the taskbar with icons that when you click them open a new instance of that program, and the running programs stay separate from the quick launch. In Windows 7 when you click on a pinned program it turns into the running program, and the pinned programs are mixed in with the running programs. Clicking a running program opens a new instance. In Windows Vista the clock only shows the time and you have to hold the mouse over it to show the date. In Windows 7 a clock displays the date underneath the time. In Windows Vista when you hold the mouse over taskbar buttons it has a blue glow. In Windows 7 the glow is the color of the icon. In Windows 7 the glow follows the mouse. In Vista the glow is static. In Windows Vista there is a Show Desktop button on the quick launch, which when you click it minimizes everything and shows the desktop. In Windows 7 the Show Desktop button is to the right of the clock. Clicking it minimizes everything, and holding the mouse over it shows a glassy outline of all applications. In Windows Vista when you right-click a taskbar button you get the same menu as when you right-click the title bar or click the icon. In Windows 7 it shows recent files opened with that program. It also has an option to open a new instance of the program, pin the program to the taskbar, or close the program. Right-clicking the thumbnail brings up the other menu. In Windows 7 if you go to taskbar properties and check Use Small Icons and change taskbar buttons to combine when taskbar is full, it is possible to make the taskbar more like the Vista one. However, the pinned programs still turn into the running programs when you click them, and the pinned programs are mixed in with the running programs. If you want them to open a new instance every time you click them and stay separate from the running programs like they do in Vista, then make a folder anywhere you want called whatever you want. Drag the programs that you want in your quick launch out of the Start menu while holding down the Alt key. Unpin all pinned programs from the taskbar, then right-click the taskbar, then go Toolbars, then New Toolbar, and select the folder you created. Then unlock the taskbar, right-click on the folder toolbar you just created, and uncheck both Show Title and Show Text. Drag the quick launch all the way to the left, resize it just big enough to show all the icons, then lock the taskbar. And the quick launch will now behave like it does in Windows Vista. Let's compare the Start menu. In Windows Vista it has pinned programs at the top. In Windows 7 it does not. In Windows 7 when you hold the mouse over recent programs it shows recent files opened with that program. In Windows Vista it does not. In Windows Vista at the bottom right of the Start menu it has Standby, Lock, and an arrow that brings up a menu with the rest of the shutdown and log off options. In Windows 7 it is Shutdown and an arrow that brings up a menu with the rest of the options. In Windows 7 you can choose what the main button does. In Windows Vista you cannot. In Windows Vista there is still an option to enable the classic Start menu. In Windows 7 this option has been removed. In Windows Vista when you maximize a program the title bar and taskbar are no longer transparent. In Windows 7 when you maximize a program the title bar and taskbar are still transparent. In Windows 7 when you drag a program to the left of the screen it snaps to the left half of the screen, and when you drag a program to the right it snaps to the right half of the screen. In Windows Vista it does not. In Windows 7 when you drag a program to the top of the screen it maximizes, and when you drag it back down it unmaximizes. In Windows Vista it does not, but you can still maximize by clicking the Maximize button, which you can also do in Windows 7. Windows Vista and 7 both have the same arrow theme. They also both have a basic theme and a classic theme. In Windows Vista when using the basic theme the taskbar and Start menu are black but the window title bars are bluish-gray. In Windows 7 when using the basic theme the taskbar, Start menu and window title bars are all bluish-gray. In Windows Vista the gadgets are on the sidebar. In Windows 7 the gadgets can be placed anywhere on the desktop. In Windows 7 Paint has been significantly updated. WordPad has also been updated to the ribbon interface. The Control-Alt-Delete screen is the same in both but with a different background, so is the logon screen. In Windows Vista the Shutdown and About Windows dialogues have a green and blue gradient behind the Windows logo with an orange gradient line underneath. In Windows 7 they have a solid gray background behind the Windows logo. Let's compare the File Explorer. In Windows Vista the folder icons are turquoise and transparent. In Windows 7 the folder icons are yellow and opaque. In Windows Vista the toolbar is dark. In Windows 7 the toolbar is light. In Windows Vista the Details pane has a slight gradient and some lines at the right. In Windows 7 it does not. In Windows Vista the pane at the left of Control Panel pages has a blue and green gradient with some lines. In Windows 7 it is light blue. In Windows Vista the control panel home has a pane at the left, in Windows 7 it does not. In Windows Vista the control panel can be in category view or classic view. In Windows 7 the view can be set to category, large icons or small icons. In Windows Vista screen resolution is one of the settings under personalization. In Windows 7 it is a separate option when you right-click the desktop. In Windows Vista personalization has a list of settings, in Windows 7 it has the themes in the middle and the settings at the bottom. In Windows Vista the desktop background can be stretch, tile or center. In Windows 7 in addition to stretch, tile and center it can also be fit, or fill. In Windows 7 when you change the desktop background it fades, in Windows Vista it just changes. In Windows Vista you can only have one background at a time, in Windows 7 you can have a slideshow that automatically changes. In Windows Vista the user account control icon is red, green, blue and yellow. In Windows 7 it is blue and yellow. Let's compare Windows 7 to Windows 8. On the left we have Windows 7 which was released in 2009 and on the right we have Windows 8 which was released in 2012. In Windows 7 we have the Windows logo on a blue leafy background and on Windows 8 we have some white flowers on a blue background. Let's compare the skin. In Windows 7 the title is left aligned, in Windows 8 the title is centered. In Windows 7 the title bar is transparent and shiny and the corners are rounded. In Windows 8 the title bar is solid and flat and the corners are square. In Windows 7 the maximize and minimize are on buttons, in Windows 8 they are not. In Windows 7 the menu bar is 3D and shiny, in Windows 8 it is flat. In Windows 7 the scroll bars and buttons are 3D and shiny, in Windows 8 they are flat. In Windows 7 the taskbar has a blurry transparency, in Windows 8 the taskbar has a flat transparency. In Windows 8 there is an automatic window color option that will make the window color be the dominant color of the background, in Windows 7 there is not. Windows 7 also has a basic theme and a classic theme. In Windows 8 the basic theme and the classic theme have been removed. In Windows 7 there is a start button at the left of the taskbar. In Windows 8 the start button has been removed. In Windows 8 when you put the mouse in the bottom left corner it comes up with a preview and when you click it it takes you to the start screen which is full screen and has tiles. In Windows 7 the start menu has recent programs at the left. In Windows 8 you can move the tiles around and resize them and you can pin any app to the start screen and clicking the tile will open that app. In Windows 7 there is an All Programs button at the bottom of the start menu which switches the left column to displaying all programs and you click the folders to open them. In Windows 8 you can right-click the start screen then click All Apps which brings up a full screen apps list and the folders are headings with the contents underneath. In Windows 7 to log off you click the arrow next to the shutdown button. In Windows 8 you click the account picture. In Windows 7 the shutdown button is on the start menu and restart is under the menu that comes up when you click the arrow next to it. In Windows 8 when you put the mouse to the bottom or top right corners of the screen it comes up with the charms bar which contains search, share, start, devices, and settings. Under settings there is a power button which brings up a menu that contains shutdown and restart. In Windows 8 when you right click in the bottom left corner it brings up a menu. In Windows 7 programs open up in Windows. In Windows 8 programs have been renamed to apps. In Windows 8 there are two types of apps, desktop apps and metro apps. Desktop apps open up in Windows on the desktop and behave very much like programs in Windows 7 and you switch between them on the taskbar in the same way as in Windows 7. Metro apps open full screen with no taskbar or title bar. To get back to start you click the bottom left corner. To switch between metro apps you click the top left corner and the entire desktop is treated as one metro app. Moving the mouse down from the top left corner brings up a pane that shows all running metro apps except from the current one. Alt-Tab switcher shows both desktop apps and metro apps. In Windows 7 Windows key tab does a 3D window fly-through. In Windows 8 it switches between metro apps. In Windows 8 to close metro apps you move the mouse to the top of the screen and then click and drag down to the bottom. In Windows 7 to close programs you click the X button and in Windows 8 to close desktop apps you also click the X button. In Windows 8 metro apps can be snapped to the side allowing you to see two apps at once, however you cannot snap them half and half. You can snap the desktop since the desktop is considered an app itself. If you snap the desktop to the side it will show a thumbnail of each running desktop app and if you click one of them the desktop will become bigger. In Windows 8 the options at the bottom of the settings charm are to do with the operating system and the options at the top of the settings charm are specific to the current Metro app. Share can share the content of the current Metro app. Right-clicking in a Metro app usually brings up the toolbars at the top and bottom. In Windows 7 the icons for programs are skeuomorphic. In Windows 8 the icons for Metro apps are flat and solid white on a tile that is a different color for each Metro app. Each tile consists of only two colors, white and the color of that Metro app. In Windows 8 the icons for desktop apps are skeuomorphic like they are in Windows 7. In Windows 8 the tiles for some Metro apps show information about that app on the tile. In Windows 8 there is an app store where you can download Metro apps. In Windows 7 to get to Control Panel you click Start and then Control Panel. In Windows 8 you right-click in the bottom left corner and then click Control Panel. In Windows 8 under the Settings charm there is also a Settings app in addition to the desktop Control Panel. The Settings app mostly contains settings to do with the Metro UI. Control Panel mostly contains settings to do with the desktop. In Windows 7 the Start menu has a search box where you can search for programs, settings or files. In Windows 8 if you just start typing while on the Start screen it will search for apps and you can also search for settings or for files. In Windows 7 when you right-click a program on the Start menu the options come up in a list. In Windows 8 when you right-click on a tile the options come up on a bar at the bottom. In Windows 7 the login screen has a list of users. In Windows 8 it has a lock screen that you click to unlock. In Windows 7 it has a blue leafy background. In Windows 8 it has a solid background. In Windows 8 the account pictures are bigger than they are in Windows 7. In Windows 7 the ease of access comes up in a window. In Windows 8 the ease of access comes up in a menu. In Windows 7 a power icon is on a red 3D and shiny button that has two segments, the main part that shuts down and an arrow that brings up shutdown options. In Windows 8 the power icon is not on a button and always brings up a menu. In Windows 7 while logging in it just says welcome in the middle of the screen with a shiny spinning circle. In Windows 8 it says welcome under the username and it has circling dots. In Windows 7 windows on the logon screen have the basic skin. In Windows 8 they have the same skin as they normally do. In Windows 7 the Control-Alt-Delete screen has a blue leafy background and the buttons are 3D and shiny. In Windows 8 it has a solid background and the buttons are flat. In Windows 7 it has a cancel button and in Windows 8 it has a back arrow. In Windows 7 to switch users you click Switch User and then select the username from the logon screen. In Windows 8 you can switch users directly from the account menu. Both Start menus have an account picture in the top right. In Windows 7 clicking the account picture opens the user accounts page in Control Panel and one of the options is to change the account picture. In Windows 8 when you click the username there is an option to change the account picture which uses the Settings app. Let's compare the File Explorer. In Windows 7 there is no up button and the title bar is empty. In Windows 8 there is an up button and there is a title in the title bar. In Windows 7 it has a toolbar at the top. In Windows 8 it has the ribbon interface and a file menu. In Windows 7 the Details pane is at the bottom. In Windows 8 the Details pane is at the right. In Windows 7 a file transfer dialog has a progress bar. In Windows 8 it draws a graph of transfer speed and time. In Windows 8 you can pause a file transfer which you cannot do in Windows 7. Let's compare Task Manager. In Windows 8 Applications has been renamed to Processes and Processes has been renamed to Details. In Windows 7 it just shows the open applications. In Windows 8 it shows the apps, background processes and Windows processes and it has a heat map. In Windows 7 under Users it just shows the users. In Windows 8 it shows what that user has open. In Windows 7 under Performance it shows CPU and RAM and has a bit of information. In Windows 8 each graph is in a different color and it shows more information about each and it shows disk usage which Windows 7 does not. In Windows 8 you can change the CPU graph to overall utilization which you cannot do in Windows 7. In Windows 7 networking is under a separate tab. In Windows 8 it is under the Performance tab. In Windows 8 there is also an App History tab. In Windows 7 Startup is under MS Config. In Windows 8 Startup has been moved to Task Manager. In Windows 7 the desktop gadgets are still present. In Windows 8 the desktop gadgets have been removed. In Windows 7 the user account control is on a darkened screenshot of the desktop with all the windows. In Windows 8 the user account control is on a darkened screenshot of just the desktop background. Let's compare the logos. On the left we have the Windows 7 logo and on the right we have the Windows 8 logo. Let's compare Windows 8 to Windows 8.1. On the left we have Windows 8 which was released in 2012 and on the right we have Windows 8.1 which was released in 2013. In Windows 8 we have some white flowers on a blue background and in Windows 8.1 we have an orange triangle pattern. In Windows 8 there is no Start button and to get to the Start screen you click the bottom left corner, In Windows 8.1 there is a Start button that takes you to the Start screen. In Windows 8 to get to all apps you right-click then click All Apps. In Windows 8.1 there is a down arrow. In Windows 8.1 you can sort apps by name, date installed, most used or category. In Windows 8 you can only sort apps by name. In Windows 8.1 there is a search box in the top right corner of the All Apps screen. In Windows 8 there is not. In Windows 8 tiles can be 2 different sizes. In Windows 8.1 tiles can be 4 different sizes. In Windows 8.1 the personalization options for the Start screen are under the Settings charm. In Windows 8 they are under the Settings app. In Windows 8 you can only select from a range of predefined background and accent color combinations. In Windows 8.1 you can select any background color with any accent color. In Windows 8.1 you can show the desktop background on Start. In Windows 8 you cannot. In Windows 8.1 some of the Start screen background patterns are different to the ones in Windows 8. In Windows 8 when you click the File Explorer icon it opens to Libraries. In Windows 8.1 it opens to this PC. In Windows 8 when you press Windows key plus E it opens to Computer. In Windows 8.1 it opens to this PC. This PC is a combination of both Libraries and Computer because it has both the folders from Libraries and the drives from Computer. In Windows 8.1 under Taskbar Properties there is a Navigation tab which is not there in Windows 8. In Windows 8.1 you can disable the charms in App Switcher hot corners, replace Command Prompt with PowerShell and make it boot to desktop instead of the Start screen which you cannot do in Windows 8. In Windows 8 we have Internet Explorer 10 and in Windows 8.1 we have Internet Explorer 11. In Windows 8 in the Metro version of Internet Explorer the tabs come up at the top. In Windows 8.1 in the Metro version of Internet Explorer the tabs come up at the bottom. In Windows 8.1 you can name groups of tiles. In Windows 8 you cannot. In Windows 8 to shut down you go Charms then Settings then Power then Shut down. You can also do this in Windows 8.1. However in Windows 8.1 you can shut down by right-clicking the Start button which you cannot do in Windows 8. In Windows 8 the charms are vertically centered. In Windows 8.1 the charms are closer to the end that you bring them in from. In Windows 8 in the Apps view you can only select one app at a time. In Windows 8.1 you can select multiple apps at a time. In Windows 8 the tiles for desktop apps are all the accent color. In Windows 8.1 the tiles for desktop apps are the color of the icon. In Windows 8 the only calculator is the desktop calculator which is the same as Windows 7's calculator. In Windows 8.1 in addition to the desktop calculator there is also now a Metro calculator. In Windows 8.1 the Bing and messaging apps have been removed. Finance has been renamed to Money and there are some new apps such as Skype, Scan, Reading List tab, Help Plus Tips, Health and Fitness, Food and Drink and Alarms. In Windows 8 when you put the mouse to the bottom left corner of a Metro app you get a thumbnail of the Start screen. In Windows 8.1 you get the Windows logo. In Windows 8 you can snap apps to the side of the screen, however you cannot split the screen half and half and you can only have 2 apps. In Windows 8.1 you can split the screen half and half, you can also have apps snapped to the side. You can also have 3 apps at once as long as your screen is high enough resolution. Let's compare the Settings app. In Windows 8 the pane at the left is gray and contains the main categories and the subcategories are along the top. In Windows 8.1 the pane at the left is the accent color and also contains the main categories. When you select one, the pane at the left then switches to displaying subcategories and there is a back arrow to get back to main categories. In Windows 8.1 the Settings app has a search button which the Windows 8 Settings app does not. In Windows 8.1 you can change the screen resolution from the Settings app. In Windows 8 you can only change the screen resolution from the desktop. In Windows 8.1 you can also change the screen resolution from the desktop. In Windows 8 there is nothing to share from the desktop. In Windows 8.1 you can share a screenshot of the desktop. In Windows 8 the only way to get to the Settings app is from the Settings charm. In Windows 8.1 the Settings app is also listed under Apps which it is not in Windows 8. Let's compare Windows 8.1 to Windows 8.1 Update 1. On the left we have Windows 8.1 which was released in 2013 and on the right we have Windows 8.1 Update 1 which was released in 2014. This is not actually a new build of the operating system but just an update that comes through Windows Update. In Windows 8.1 Update 1 there is now a power button and a search button on the Start screen. In Windows 8.1 when you right-click a tile the options are on a bar at the bottom. In Windows 8.1 Update 1 they are in a list. In Windows 8.1 Update 1 Customize has been renamed to Name Groups. In Windows 8.1 Update 1 the Metro apps are grouped by letter. In Windows 8.1 the Metro apps are not grouped. In Windows 8.1 Update 1 there is now an option to show more apps in the apps view which makes the apps smaller. In Windows 8.1 Update 1 there is a link to the desktop control panel in the Settings app. In Windows 8.1 there is not. In Windows 8.1 to close a Metro app you have to go to the top of the screen then click and drag down to the bottom. In Windows 8.1 Update 1 when you put the mouse to the top of the screen it comes up with a title bar which has an X and minimize button on it. In Windows 8.1 Update 1 you can also still drag Metro apps down to close them the same as in Windows 8.1. In Windows 8.1 Update 1 the option to when assign and or close all apps on a screen, go to the desktop instead of start is now enabled by default. In Windows 8.1 it is disabled by default, but it can be enabled or disabled in both. In Windows 8.1 Update 1 you can now pin Metro apps to the taskbar and running Metro apps are shown on the taskbar. In Windows 8.1 Update 1 you can bring up the taskbar from within a Metro app by putting the mouse to the bottom of the screen. In Windows 8.1 you cannot. Let's compare Windows 8.1 Update 1 to Windows 10 RTM. On the left we have Windows 8.1 Update 1 which was released in 2014 and on the right we have Windows 10 RTM which was released in 2015. In Windows 8.1 Update 1 we have an orange triangle pattern and in Windows 10 RTM we have the Windows logo with a blue light shining through. Let's compare the skin. In Windows 8.1 the title is centered and in Windows 10 the title is left aligned. In Windows 8.1 the windows have a border and in Windows 10 they are borderless. In Windows 8.1 the title bar is the window color when active and gray when inactive. In Windows 10 the title bar is always white. In Windows 8.1 the title text is always black. In Windows 10 the title text is black when active and gray when inactive. In Windows 8.1 the menu bar is separate from the title bar. In Windows 10 the menu bar and title bar blend in together. In Windows 8.1 the X button has a red box around it. In Windows 10 the red box only comes up when you put the mouse over it. In Windows 8.1 the menu highlight has a 1 pixel line round the edge. In Windows 10 it does not. In Windows 8.1 the taskbar is the window color. In Windows 10 it is black. In Windows 8.1 the taskbar is more transparent than it is in Windows 10. In Windows 8.1 when you hold the mouse over taskbar buttons there is a glow that follows the mouse. In Windows 10 the whole button lights up. In Windows 8.1 when you click start it takes you to a full screen bunch of live tiles. It also has account options, power options and search in the top right and a down arrow at the bottom to get to all apps. In Windows 10 the start menu has live tiles at the right, at the left it has account picture, recent programs, file explorer, settings, power and all apps. In Windows 10 the start menu is transparent. When you hold the mouse over recent programs it shows recent files opened with that program. When you click all apps the left column switches to displaying all apps. In Windows 8.1 the Metro apps are grouped by name then the desktop apps are grouped by category. In Windows 10 they are all grouped by name and the folders are mixed in with the apps. In Windows 10 you have to click the folders to open them. In Windows 8.1 the folders are all open. In Windows 8.1 tiles for desktop apps are the color of the icon. In Windows 10 they are all the same color. In Windows 10 Metro apps have been renamed to UWP apps. In Windows 10 most of the UWP apps are the same color. In Windows 8.1 the Metro apps are different colors. In Windows 8.1 there is a charms bar when you put the mouse to the bottom or top right corner of the screen. In Windows 10 the charms bar has been removed. In Windows 8.1 Metro apps open full screen. Putting the mouse to the top brings up the title bar which has X and minimize. Right-clicking brings up the apps options and the settings for that app are under the charms. In Windows 10 UWP apps open in a window that can be dragged around, maximized and minimized. There is a menu within the app which contains the options and settings. In Windows 8.1 the Windows 7 calculator is still present. In Windows 10 it has been removed. In Windows 8.1 when you drag a window to the side of the screen it snaps to that half of the screen. In Windows 10 it asks you what you want to do with the other half of the screen. In Windows 10 you can also snap windows to the corner of the screen which you cannot do in Windows 8.1. In Windows 10 there is a task view button. You can have multiple desktops, each with different apps open. In Windows 8.1 Windows key tab switches between Metro apps. In Windows 10 it opens Task View. In Windows 10 there is a Notifications button in the bottom right corner that brings up the Action Center which contains notifications and actions. In Windows 10 there is an option to use Start Full Screen, but it still looks different to how it does in Windows 8.1. There is a button at the top left that brings up a pane at the left that is the same as the left column of the Windows 10 Start menu. Clicking All Apps switches that pane to displaying all apps. In Windows 8.1 there is a down arrow that switches the entire screen to displaying all apps. In Windows 10 there is a tablet mode which also makes Start Full Screen, hides the running programs on the taskbar by default and spaces the taskbar buttons further apart. You can switch between apps using Task View. Apps are always maximized, minimizing an app shows start rather than the desktop. UWP apps hide their title bar and you can drag apps down to close them like in Windows 8.1. Let's compare the sign-in screen. In Windows 8.1 it has a solid background. In Windows 10 it has the Windows 10 logo in the background. In Windows 8.1 the profile picture is square, in Windows 10 it is round. In Windows 8.1 ease of access is in the bottom left and power is in the bottom right. In Windows 10 power and ease of access are both in the bottom right and there is a list of users in the bottom left. Let's compare the Control-Alt-Delete screen. In Windows 8.1 it has a back arrow and in Windows 10 it has a cancel button. In Windows 8.1 ease of access is in the bottom left and power is in the bottom right. In Windows 10 power and ease of access are both in the bottom right. In Windows 10 the text is smaller than it is in Windows 8.1. In Windows 8.1 File Explorer opens to this PC which shows folders and drives. In Windows 10 File Explorer opens to Quick Access which shows pinned folders, recent folders and recent files. In Windows 10 there is an option to make File Explorer open to this PC like it does in Windows 8.1. Both Windows 8.1 and Windows 10 still have the old control panel from Windows 7. They both also have a new Settings app. In Windows 8.1 personalization still uses Control Panel. In Windows 10 personalization uses the Settings app. In Windows 8.1 the Settings app is full screen. The pane at the left is the accent color and contains the main categories. When you select one the pane at the left switches to displaying subcategories and the contents of the selected subcategory is displayed at the right. In Windows 10 the Settings app is in a window. It starts off with a gray background and the main categories or icons in the middle. When you click one it then has a gray pane at the left with subcategories and the contents of the selected subcategory is displayed at the right. In Windows 10 when you resize command prompt the text traps. In Windows 8.1 when you resize command prompt it has a scroll bar. In Windows 8.1 when you maximize command prompt it only takes up the left edge of the screen. In Windows 10 it takes up the entire screen. In Windows 10 you can make command prompt transparent which you cannot do in Windows 8.1. In Windows 8.1 the only browser is Internet Explorer, but it can be launched in desktop mode or Metro mode. In Windows 10 Internet Explorer can only be launched in desktop mode, but there is a new browser called Microsoft Edge. Let's compare Windows 10 RTM to Windows 10 May 2021 update. On the left we have Windows 10 RTM which was released in 2015 and on the right we have Windows 10 May 2021 update which was released in 2021. In Windows 10 RTM we have the Windows logo with a blue light shining through it and in Windows 10 May 2021 update we have the Windows logo on a light blue background. Let's compare the Start menu. Both have tiles on the right. In RTM the left column of the Start menu has Account, Recent Programs, File Explorer, Settings, Power and All Apps. Clicking All Apps switches the left column to displaying all apps. In May 2021 update the left column always displays all apps and at the left it has icons for Account, Documents, Pictures, Settings and Power. When you put the mouse over them it displays their labels. In RTM the tiles are the accent color. In May 2021 update they are black. In May 2021 update when you hold the mouse over tiles there is a glow that follows the mouse. In RTM there is not. Both Start menus have a transparent background. However, May 2021 update has a softer transparency and the tiles also have some transparency. In RTM the icons for UWP apps use flat design. In May 2021 update the icons for UWP apps use material design. In RTM the icons in the apps list are on tiles. In May 2021 update they are not. In May 2021 update there is an option to show the accent color on the title bars on classic apps. In RTM there is not. In RTM the accent color can only be selected from a predefined palette. In May 2021 update it can be any custom color. In RTM the apps are always light and the taskbar, Start menu and Action Center are always dark. In May 2021 update both can be set to either light or dark, however setting the app mode to dark only works in UWP apps and File Explorer. Most classic apps will still remain light. In May 2021 update some UWP apps such as Calculator have a transparent frosted glass effect and there is a glow that follows the mouse. In RTM they do not. In May 2021 update items in the Start menu also have a glow that follows the mouse. In RTM the taskbar has a flat transparency. In May 2021 update it has the frosted glass effect. In RTM the locked screen slides up to reveal the sign-in page which has the Windows 10 logo in the background. In Windows 10 the sign-in page is on top of a blurred lock screen background. Let's compare the Settings app. In RTM it has a gray background and in May 2021 update it has a white background. In RTM the text is under the icons. In May 2021 update the text is to the right of the icons. In May 2021 there is a glow that follows the mouse. In May 2021 update there is a bar at the top. In RTM the left column is light gray. In May 2021 update it is frosted glass. In May 2021 update the items in the left column have icons. In RTM they do not. In May 2021 update some things such as taskbar properties have been moved from control panel to settings. These also include programs and features, power options and system. In May 2021 update in the menu that you get when you right-click the Start button control panel has been replaced with settings, but control panel does still exist in both. In RTM the menu that you get when you right-click the taskbar is white. In May 2021 update it is black and more spaced apart. In RTM Microsoft Edge is its own browser. In May 2021 update it is Chromium based. In May 2021 update in addition to the original MS Paint there is also a UWP app called Paint 3D. In May 2021 update the registry editor has an address bar. In RTM it does not. In May 2021 update the UAC prompt looks different to how it does in RTM. In RTM in Task View the desktops are at the bottom. In May 2021 update in Task View the desktops are at the top. Let's compare Windows 10 May 2021 update to Windows 11 Insider Preview. On the left we have Windows 10 May 2021 update which was released in 2021, and on the right we have Windows 11 Insider Preview which was released in 2021. In Windows 10 we have the Windows 10 logo on a blue background, and on Windows 11 we have some blue wavy things. Let's compare the skin. In Windows 10 the window corners are square. In Windows 11 the window corners are rounded. In Windows 10 the menus have square corners, a gray background and a blue highlight. In Windows 11 the menus have rounded corners, a white background and a gray highlight. They also have more of a shadow than they do in Windows 10. In Windows 10 the buttons are gray and square. In Windows 11 they are wide and rounded. In Windows 11 the scroll bars have also been updated. Let's compare the taskbar. In Windows 11 the taskbar is thicker than it is in Windows 10. In Windows 10 the icons on the taskbar are left aligned. In Windows 11 they are centered by default but can be left aligned. In Windows 10 when you right-click the taskbar you get heaps of options. In Windows 11 you only get taskbar settings. In Windows 10 you can have the taskbar at the bottom, at the side or at the top. In Windows 11 the taskbar can only be at the bottom. In Windows 10 you can make the taskbar show labels, combine only one taskbar is full, and use small icons like it does in Windows XP and Vista. In Windows 11 you cannot. In Windows 10 you can have folder toolbars. In Windows 11 you cannot. In Windows 10 you can change the height of the taskbar. In Windows 11 you cannot. Let's compare the Start menu. In Windows 10 the pinned apps are on tiles at the right. In Windows 11 the pinned apps are icons at the top and it has recommended below. In Windows 10 the All Apps list is on the left. In Windows 11 you have to click All Apps. In Windows 10 the Power and Account are at the left. In Windows 11 they are at the bottom. In Windows 10 you can name groups of tiles and you can drag them around. In Windows 11 you can have multiple pages of pinned apps. In Windows 10 you can resize the Start menu. In Windows 11 you cannot. In Windows 10 you can arrange tiles into folders. In Windows 11 you can move the icons around. In Windows 10 the Start menu has square corners and touches the taskbar. In Windows 11 it has rounded corners and floats. In Windows 10 when you hover over items in the apps list there is a glow that follows the mouse. In Windows 11 there is not. In Windows 10 there is a notification center icon to the right of the date and time. In Windows 11 there is not. In Windows 10 it brings up a pane at the side with notifications at the top and actions at the bottom. In Windows 11 when you click on the clock the notifications are at the top and the calendar is at the bottom and they have rounded corners and float. In Windows 11 when you click the network and volume icons it brings up the actions with the volume slider underneath. In Windows 10 the network and volume icons are separate. In Windows 11 they are combined. In Windows 10 the calendar is square and touches the edges. In Windows 11 it is rounded and floats. In Windows 10 there is a glow that follows the mouse. In Windows 11 there is not. In Windows 10 when you clear all notifications the notification area is empty. In Windows 11 when you clear all notifications the notification area goes away. Let's compare the locked screen. In Windows 10 the clock is in the bottom left. In Windows 11 the clock is in the top center. In Windows 10 the Control-Alt-Delete screen is the accent color. In Windows 11 the Control-Alt-Delete screen is black. In Windows 11 when you hold the mouse over the Maximize button it gives you some snapping options. In Windows 10 it does not. In Windows 10 when you drag a window to the side or to the top it gives you a faint outline. In Windows 11 it gives you a blurry outline. In Windows 11 you can snap the screen in 3. In Windows 10 you can only snap the screen in 2 or 4. In Windows 11 when you have multiple windows stacked, That group shows up above the taskbar when you put the mouse over any of the windows in that group. In Windows 10 it does not. In Windows 10 when in portrait the windows still snap to the sides of the screen. In Windows 11 when in portrait the windows snap to the top and bottom of the screen. Let's compare the File Explorer. In Windows 11 the folder icons have been updated. In Windows 10 we have the ribbon interface and a file menu. In Windows 11 there are some icons along the top and there is a menu. In Windows 11 in Details view the items are more spaced apart than they are in Windows 10, however it is possible to enable compact view which puts them closer together like in Windows 10. Let's compare the right-click menu. In Windows 11 cut, copy, rename, share and delete are icons at the top of the menu. In Windows 10 they are items on the menu. In Windows 11 the menu items are more spaced apart than they are in Windows 10. In Windows 11 it says the keyboard shortcuts next to the options. In Windows 10 it does not. In Windows 11 most of the menu items have icons. In Windows 11 you can click Show More Options which brings up the old menu. In Windows 11 the menu that you get when you right-click the desktop has also been updated. And you can click Show More Options to bring up the old menu. Let's compare the Settings app. In Windows 10 the icons use flat design. In Windows 11 the icons use material design. In Windows 10 the main categories are displayed full screen when the Settings app is opened, and when you click one, the subcategories are displayed down the left with the subcategory contents to the right. In Windows 11 the main categories are displayed down the left and the subcategories within the selected main category to the right. When you click a subcategory the right switches to displaying subcategory contents. In Windows 10 to switch to a different subcategory within the same main category you click it on the left. In Windows 11 you have to go back to the selected main category and select a different subcategory. In Windows 10 to select a different main category you have to go back to the home page and then select it. In Windows 11 you select it down the left. In Windows 10 the pane at the left of the Settings app is made of frosted glass. In Windows 11 it is not. In Windows 10 in Task View it shows your running programs and gives you a timeline and the desktops are at the top. In Windows 11 it does not give you a timeline and the desktops are at the bottom. In Windows 11 there is now a widgets dashboard. In Windows 10 Internet Explorer is still present. In Windows 11 it has been removed. In Windows 10 when you right-click an icon on the taskbar the menu has square corners and touches the taskbar. In Windows 11 it has rounded corners and floats. In Windows 7 it also has rounded corners and floats. In Windows 8 and 8.1 it has square corners and floats. Let's compare the logo. On the left we have the Windows 10 logo and on the right we have the Windows 11 logo. In this video I compared each version of Windows NT. For comparisons between DOS-based Windows versions watch the history of Microsoft Windows.